It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megafoon Rugby.
Welcome back to the Lekker Rugby Pod. Harry's been spending some time in Munster, and he was lucky enough to be invited by the Foleys, Munster royalty, and also he was sort of led into the Bulls inner circle, which I think is a special thing, and I was quite envious of him. So this episode, we're going to be talking about his experience in Munster, being close to the Bulls, what he experienced from both sides of it, and get a bit of a bird's eye view of this developing rivalry between two great teams in the ever maturing URC. Before we get back to Harry, just remember to press that subscribe button. We want to get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of June, and if you can help us doing that, it'd be much appreciated. So Harry, you said you're in London at the moment.
I was at MVA. I can see Twickenham, so we know that I'm in London. Sometimes that's the only reason I know where I am is I can look and see which rugby stadium is in the horizon. And no, but I did spend the best part of a week in Munster, in a particular part of Munster, a little town called Killaloe, which is on the banks of the River Shannon, which post a bridge turns into a lake, which turns into an estuary running wildly to the Atlantic. And these small towns matter just like they do in the Highveld, identity, roots. And so you have County Clare and County Tipperary staring at each other. You know the song "It's a Long Way to Tipperary." I was so close to Tipperary that I could skip a rock, and if I maybe it skipped 13 times, it would have hit the banks on the other side of Ballina. Ballina is a town in Ireland. They have towns of the same name. So if someone says come from Ballina, then you have to also establish, wait, is that in County Mayo or is it in County Tipperary? It is dorpy type thing, like the Kleindorp on the river, and people's livelihoods sometimes bear resemblance to their grandfathers. So, maybe if you're a pub guy, then the pub comes down in the family, or if you're a fisherman, it comes down. There's roots. So it's not so far afield for a guy like Gert Smal or Rassie Erasmus to rock up into Munster and feel at home. CJ Stander famously felt at home, and I was privileged to be there as guest and hosted by the Foley family. And it doesn't get any deeper in Munster rugby than the Foley family.
Harry, when we talk about the Foleys, we all know about Anthony Foley and his tragic death. A lot was made of it. You helped to develop a play that his sister wrote about his life called Soldier Field. And tell us about the Foleys a little bit. That just give us a bit of background.
So Brendan Foley is the old man, the godfather. He's definitely a giant figure, and he's 11 cap Irish international. Of course, back in the day, it was harder to get caps, so 11 caps then probably equals 60 something, which is what his son got. Anthony Foley, the late Anthony Foley, Axel Foley, nickname was from the Beverly Hills Cop character. And Brendan and Anthony cast a huge shadow, but also a daughter, Rosie, who played for Ireland as well. My friend Orla, there's the other sister who's a rugby hippie, a troubadour, a songstress, someone who goes around the world and has been in all these different games for Ireland, sort of holds it together and a storyteller. But Brendan Foley was a guy who owned a pub in Limerick. Limerick is the big city close by. So on the Shannon River, if you're kind of picturing the provinces, the four provinces of Ireland, which will remind guys back in the day of South Africa's four provinces, then Munster's sort of the heartland. It's got Cork in it, it's got Limerick in it, and these little towns all around, a lot of them agricultural or trades routes. Brendan Foley had a pub for 8-9 years in Killaloe as well. And then he got to play for Ireland. He got to play for a club named Shannon. And some of these rivalries are as deep as the ones like in the Boerland, where you have schools rivalries like Boys High against Jim. It's life or death, Gary Owen against Shannon. So Shannon was the Foley club. I think Anthony played there too as well, before he captained Ireland and got his 62 caps. So you have this kind of lineage of a lock, Brendan, and then the son, a number 8, playing for Ireland, coming from the Shannon area, the Limerick area, the Killaloe area. That's where Anthony's buried. He died suddenly in France on the eve of a cup clash, and so that's been devastating. But I would say as well, when you're walking around in that area, and I did every day with a dog, or this dog, you know, we say death and taxes are the only two certainty. I would add a Peter Steph to toy tackle in the World Cup final. But if you take, taxes and a Peter Steph to toy tackle, those you can dodge sometimes, but death is undodgeable. And a lot of countries that I've gone to and spent time in, they try to dodge death. Let's just not talk about it. It's not really part of us. It's kind of a bad subject. Um, let's just avoid that and use euphemisms. I would say that walking around Ireland and just talking to people and being around them and going to a pub and seeing a corner of a pub devoted to the dead, to memories lost, to a victory by Munster over the All Blacks. Brendan Foley played in that game, by the way, in 1978 when Munster actually beat New Zealand on a tour game. They don't really forget the dead. The dead do matter in Ireland. The deeds of the gone are still amongst them. The words and the soil in which they lay, palpable. The graves seem to be everywhere when you walk. Flowers grow, walls intervene, but they're somehow worked into those stories. Every bench is devoted to someone gone, and there's a story about him or her and a poem. Um, the music is also everywhere. I mean, I didn't go to any place where there was not someone, even a biker, a motorcyclist on a Harley, on the Easter Sunday, stopped his bike and moored it by the river, by the loch next to the river, and with a church from wherever, like 1200 behind him, started singing some blues songs. And in the pubs, people start singing, and a granny and a small girl and a dog are all singing along. So the music tells a story of blood, flowers unkempt and fertilized by dogs. You walk around Ireland and you're going to be connected. The scale of it is smaller than the Highveld. There's nothing like Joburg. There's no big smoke. Um, Things are constructed in a smaller way for walking. And you could see why so many South Africans went over to Munster and found a home and made a place. And if someone said, "Where are you from?" Yes, of course, the accent would give them away and they would have to say, but part of them might say in their head, "I'm from here." And so this is actually an interesting story because it breeds rivalry.
I'm glad you mentioned rivalry. So I want to dig into that a little bit. This is a fairly new competition. The URC is only in its fourth season now, but some of these, especially Irish rivalries, and of course of Glasgow, I suppose, and lately after last week in Edinburgh, but a couple of nice rivalries developing. Talk to me about rivalries a bit as well.
I mean, obviously, it was all leading to a match, right? And why did the Shannon boys and the Gary Owen boys get so much up for the derby? Well, it's the same reason why derbies exist everywhere. The closest ones, in football, Liverpool versus Everton. I mean, there's parts of the city of Liverpool where you cannot walk through wearing Liverpool colors. There's something about yours and mine, north and south. We're the Windgat guys. We're the guys too full of ourselves. Back in the day, we had floppy hair. We were drinking lattes when you didn't even know what that was. Sorry, but it's like this forever Munster versus Leinster. So we're building those in the URC now, the IRC, and the Bulls just ignited a new chapter in that rivalry by being there and seeing it, and then able to go to, invited by Jake White to come to the Bulls captain's run and spend 15 minutes with him talking, watching the thing play out, and literally chatting about tactics. Because in the end, no matter how much I want to hold my nose and not love you guys and not want you to too well, I want you to get to the finals and lose to us. In the end, I did want you guys to beat Munster, but it was very interesting because I got to see it from the other side. Just being around these towns, literally going to a musical in a small town, a smaller town than Killaloe, and talking to people because everyone wants to meet you, everyone wants to visit, and they jump right in. It's a polite society, but it's very informal. So in a sense, you just start talking to people. I got to see how they saw the visiting Bulls, which is hard men. They would always follow that with, but they're religious, aren't they? Um, that was their perception, is that every South African is a hard man, religious, and doesn't talk very much. So, I think going into the match, there was this perception by Munster that our fortress will hold. All around Limerick, there's walls and there's stories about treaties and there's Viking raids and in Killaloe, the great king, Brian Boru was there, and Cromwell was on the other side, and there's all kinds of, you know, centuries gone. I'm not saying Cromwell and Brian Boru were contemporaries, because if you make mistakes when you're talking about Ireland, sometimes you get brought up. Um, I'm just saying that history ran through that area.
I'm trying to place myself in Limerick now. Every stadium you go to has got a sense of occasion when you're walking up to it, or, like in Ellis Park, you're a bit scared, walking up to the stadium or driving there. And Loftus, you walk in the streets and like Cape Town is a different vibe altogether, especially now in the DHL stadium, close to the waterfront, very different to Newlands, but all of it had a sense of occasion. Talk to me about what it's like going to a rugby match in Munster, what the stadium is like, what the surroundings are like, what the atmosphere is like, the sense of occasion.
The whole area Limerick is an interesting town because there's this big stadium, but right next to the stadium, there's a field with a horse. This week it was two horses, and they're just kind of grazing in the shadow of the stadium. People walk up to the stadium from wherever they're from. There's not some massive car park associated with it. Around it is normal houses, and there's not a feeling of procession into the stadium. It's more you're walking in a normal neighborhood, up from the bridge, up from the pubs, and then there's a stadium with a horse, and then you rock up in, and it's not like the confusing number system of Loftus, where you have to have a slide rule and hieroglyphics and the Rosetta Stone to know exactly where you're going. It's just a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you go in and you get in. You can go from any section to any section. It's not very exclusively laid out. You can go up and down, I think, throughout. It's not like you have to go up a turret and a tunnel to get somewhere. And it's got a lot of the same food fare that you might expect, heavily onioned sausages glistening in the heat, smashed onto some mustard toast, and people having a scarf. But it was interesting to me that the feeling, this non-Winchat thing that Munster's got going on of humility. When they talk about a guy they like, they talk about him as humble. One of the first things people said about Axel Anthony Foley, and they like that downplayed hard man humility. So the lead up is not grand necessarily. There's beautiful songs, there's old songs, and people sing along, but they're more into the rugby. And make no mistake about it, the people of Munster, people of Limerick in particular, really understand rugby. Limerick and its environs, unlike maybe Cork or other places in Ireland, yes, there's hurling, the GAA sport, and all kinds of Gaelic games, but it wasn't so dominated by football, by soccer, as some of the other places. And there's a deeply inculcated sense of rugby and how it works. So a maul is greeted by this giant roar in the stadium. And an up and under, a Gary Owen, is unbelievably exciting because they rise into a swell, almost operatic, trying to make Keegan Johannes or Devin Williams drop the ball. And luckily, on the night, guys like Kanan Moody had sure hands, as did Devin Williams. Their kicking maybe wasn't sometimes so good for the line, but just sure-handed was the key in that weather.
Right, Harry, this is now where it gets interesting. You were invited to the Bulls captain's run on Friday at Thomond Park, and you were able to spend some time with Jake and with the players. And tell me about that. I'm very keen to hear about that.
Going into the game, so like I said, I was invited to go to captain's run by Jake, and just hung out with him talking about literally the trajectory of a cross kick and what's the best thing. He was interested in other sports and how they adapt to rugby. just ideas on whether you could have more plays or less plays in the red zone. Is it better to hold, store up, and spin, or is it better to, almost slow down momentum? Are there things that could move the ball, shift the ball quicker that we haven't thought about? Are there old plays from 1950 or 1960 that we just lost and forgotten? That's sort of a Munsterian thought, actually. And but it was so rainy. I mean, you could see guys like Ruan Norte going up to do a practice restart. He must have got about 3 out of 10, even with no one contesting it. It was so slippery. And even though the stadium was built up really high, so it should drain really well, the edges of the field on touchline are very slippery and pool. And so you could see that it was difficult. Cross kicks, were the thing. Variety of kicks. Johan Goosen was doing so many types of kicks. I called him the over-the-shoulder boulder holder. Right? There was one in the game where he actually kicked it and landed up behind him. That wasn't probably the one he was looking for, but chips over, high leg kicks where you're coming around almost, diagonals. And he and Keenan Moody were really in sync, and you could tell that was true. Keenan Moody was doing a lot of practicing by himself, just watching the bounce of the ball, testing the bounce of the ball, kicking, scuffing the ball on purpose, getting in corners. Sebastian Leclerc, the same thing, just trying to find the awkward corners of the field, knowing they were up against a Lekker back in Munster, Thacker Abrahams, who is as quick as it gets and nimble. So interesting in the captain's practice, forwards and backs separated, obviously, but at some point they came together and did, that series of rucks. And if I had to go forward in time, I would say that was a crucial practice because there were possession phases by Munster. A giant set in the first half that actually ended in a try with 3 successive penalties against the Bulls, and then the one at the end of the match to ice it, where the Bulls did not commit a penalty or were not adjudicated to commit a penalty in 20 plus phases. So that's how they ended up. Cameron Hanekom literally was fielding high balls, and a lot of them kept bouncing over the stands into me. So I was having the strange position of actually throwing the ball to Cam quite a bit. And fair enough, fair play. He always said thank you each time. But I had a nice chat. And going into the game, I just thought, Jake is really up for this. His players seem very confident. My nemesis, the man that I always thought was the scariest human being in a rugby field, Kubas Visa, looked like he was into it. Didn't talk to in captain's run, but did exchange a bit of a nod, just hey. And then Andries Becker sporting his shorts, no socks look, running around showing the boys it wasn't cold. It's not rainy. What is this? This is not rain. This is not water. I'm in the clouds already. My head's there. It just felt like a happy crowd. Goosen had his familiar strapping on, and he was gingerly walking around, making me scared, making you scared. But it felt like they were not overawed by the occasion in the empty stadium of red, the Red Army, the history, the stories, the way that Munster came back from nowhere to win the Urk 2 years ago. The way that they seem to rise, they have there's a similarity between Munster and the Bulls, where no matter how good they don't seem to be, when you go to try to play the Bulls at Loftus or you go to try to play the Munster in Limerick, it's difficult.
Just one thing about the URC seems to be maturing quite nicely, the Urk, as you call it. You irk a lot of people by calling it the Urk, I must tell you that. But the URC. And the nice thing about this, these new rivalries, like you said, you mentioned briefly the rivalries brewing. And to me, it almost felt like we won a test match for some reason. The occasion felt that big. And what I said to you when we were discussing this episode is, you were on the inside of both these teams. You were on the inside of the Foleys, you were on the inside of Munster Royalty, call it that. But you also allowed inside the Bulls to a degree, even after the game as well. And why is this such a big rivalry now starting to brew? We've known about Leinster because the Bulls have been Leinster's bogey team to a degree. Now suddenly Munster's also on radar. Why did this this game feel so monumental almost?
Mm. No, that's a good question. I suppose rivalries feed off of repetition and revenge and the feeling of grievance, the feeling of contention. Something must happen in the game. Well, first of all, it has to be close. There has to be jeopardy. If Munster loses this at home, it shakes their confidence. It makes them go into knockout mode for the remainder of the United Rugby Championship, the URC. Let's just say IRC. It's funny. So there was that. There's pride. There's innate pride. Munstermen have pride. Limerick walks around thinking that they are not someone who relents or concedes or surrenders their patch of ground. They're stubborn people. And so, it's just a matter of don't come into my house and don't come into my backyard and bully me. There's that. Okay, but then you say, well, why in particular South Africa? I think there's enough familiarity because of Gert Smal, because of Rassie Erasmus, because of CJ Stander. They perceive that they know us. They don't know the complexity probably, nor do we know theirs. And it's very difficult to know another society's inner code words and all that stuff. So, but there's that. I think the second thing is with it being Stormers, Bulls in the finals, and the idea that instead of the old ways of the Celtic League and the league before the IRC, where Irish were top dog, now there's a perception of en masse, like as a group, maybe South Africans are making a bid because what other country had a finalist? There is the way the Bulls present themselves when they come into a place, which is big forehead, hard nose, knuckles. It engenders a response. I mean, it's not like they're coming in reading the razzle dazzle, or like a Scottish team maybe, where it's just kind of yapping, talking like a terrier. It's more like, hey, I'm a big bull and I'm coming here, and what I liked about the Bulls approach sort of for the week was it was a no bullshit approach. It was no bulls. There was no caveats like, oh, a budget, or I wish we had, Arches name on our team. It was just, we are who we are. These are my guys. This is who I'm riding into battle with. And I want to take you out of the pub by the neck, stick you in an alley, and beat you. Okay? It was that kind of game. There's plenty of niggle. Where does that come from? I don't know. It's innate. It's like you get into an elevator with a guy, you just kind of size him up. So there's just a way that works in the world, right? You're always looking at each other and saying, who's top dog? So I think in the IRC, there's that macro South African-Irish duel. I mean, with Leinster obviously waiting in the wings for everybody and saying, yeah, but we got Geordie and Archead as extra measure. I also think that the game itself now creates another layer of rivalry, because as the game went on, there were mistakes by the referee that are undeniably mistakes. There's this classic thing where Oli Jager goes out for a HIA. He gets replaced by a tight head prop, who in turn gets injured. The referee, doesn't matter where he's from, but for some reason, every time a referee makes a mistake, they always mention his nationality. So we go Italian ref. For some reason, that's supposed to tell us about Italians. Just say the ref. The ref gets it wrong by thinking that Ollie went off as tight head, and then tight head replacement goes off, and this sort of unintentional error of a team that has two injuries at tight head results in that you're one man down, not realizing that it was an HIA, and that's the exception. So HIA exception means you don't do that. You get to bring someone on and you have uncontested scrums, but you don't go down a man. What I don't know is at home why Munster coaches weren't able to, I don't know, pitch a fit, run someone on there, make the mascot run on there and just stop it and say, hey, let's stop for 3 minutes while we consult the rule book.
Yeah, okay, sure. I know about the 40-man thing, but those things tend to even out, don't they? I mean, the Bulls with the disadvantage of having to go to uncontested scrums, for example.
as in most times in rugby, it kind of evens out because there was a head hit against the Bulls that 95% of non-Italian refs would have carded, and it was just a penalty. I mean, it led to the score that won, but my point is it would have even been harder a man down in the final 10 minutes to get across the line as well. So maybe the Bulls would have scored again. And you can always play that off. And also uncontested scrums in general are a bad thing for Bulls because now you've removed one of your biggest edges. And Jake was talking about that, with me in the kitchen. That we get to that story later. But I was sitting with Jake White in the kitchen. That's where we had our press conference, the kitchen cabinet, and and he talked about that. You go into a game, and he said, "Yo, Harry, you're right. We had Kane and Moody as a big edge. Beers after the match. I was having a beer with my nemesis, Kubas Visa, who kind of shaped like a prop, but he's a lock." Like he's like a 6'6" guy who's like a prop. So it's very strange to sort of understand how you would place him in the field. But he was saying, geez, Kane Moody's big. Like you look at him across the bar and he's like, you wouldn't say he was a back. So the idea of getting cross kicks to him was always on the cards. But the other thing was, let's scrum all day long on a wet, muddy field. Whoever drops the ball, let's give a high five because that's what we want. So it wasn't like going to uncontested scrums, which is not Munster's fault, by the way, was something that was, a bad thing for Bulls or that's exactly, but it's not a good thing either. So we don't know how that would have played out, but there could have been 3 or 4 more scrum penalties generated. So what did I just talked about a story that now becomes part of legend and lore. And if I learned anything on my week in Killaloe is that Irish people love legend and lore and can go into subjects from very long ago when suddenly you realize, wait, we're talking about 3 different centuries, but you made it all one story and it's about the same coffee bar. So, so I think that just becomes a grievance, a thing to be repaired. So next year, when the 2 sides meet, now you're going to have this residual problem, and that's cool. That's fun. That's like Stormers and Bulls forever. We always going to throw in your face the number of times that Jake has lost to Dobbo, and it makes you crazy. And every time you do get one back, it's even more special. So you'd think that the next time they play, there's that. I think the Stormers have already developed a rivalry with Munster, and just so we're clear. Munster is not Vinchat. They're humble guys. They're not big talkers and all that, but they do play in a very hard way. And what they like about their rugby is hardness. So, and what they liked about recruiting South Africans is the hardness, the non-talking, the quiet, tough guy. So that all sets up when you have when you're similar, you have better rivalries. When you have overlaps, it's like 2 brothers, and. I think there's that. But in the end, it comes down to professional sports, it comes down to places and playoffs and opportunities. And the Champions Cup is a massive moneymaker. Everyone I met in Munster that was a rugby person, they all talked about their weekends in Europe. Did you have a good crack? It's like a Joel. How was your crack in La Rochelle, and did you go again for Bordeaux? And they love it. It's a hop skip. It's like it's just a little tiny jump to Durban. So it's a real joy for them to go and enjoy the surroundings and Munster's history in Europe, as they call it. Just those cups is what makes people legends. So if you lose and you fall out of the top 8, you fall out of the prize spots, then you don't qualify for next year's Champions Cup. And it's millions of euros lost. And it's tourism back and forth. So the game had another undercurrent, which is, does it destroy our bid for next year?
Right. Enough about the build-up now. We've talked about the captain's run and the meeting the Foleys and the horses in the pasture next to the stadium and everything else. Talk to me about the game itself. To me, it felt like a test match to a degree. What were your impressions?
So going into the match, it seemed like Munster having just gone through a whirlwind of beating La Rochelle and then coming up short in Bordeaux. with a dodgy line out, that they would fix the line out. They would pick a 6'9", 6'10" blindside flank to add to Peter O'Mahony, his height, and just kind of flood the line out. There was a perception that Jack Crowley and Craig Casey would be able to run the thing. Craig Casey goes out ill during the game. Stretch run, it's important for Munster to always qualify for the Champions Cup. It's a perennial challenger. So losing to the Bulls at home would be a bad thing for them for sure, because then they makes the rest of their matches white knuckle time. But going in, there was this feeling of confidence, I think, by the locals that the Bulls with the back line of the Bulls maybe wasn't up to it. And they knew it'd be a proper slog against the forwards. But it just felt like they were thinking there was a way to outthink the Bulls and get around them at home and then take the day. And so the game itself actually went the way most people had predicted. Captain's practice, when we were talking about what would happen and Jake was musing about it, that's what it looked like. 1 try each, hold Munster to 1 try, you have a shot. Craig Casey, Jack Crowley, Conor Murray, also running the ship when Craig Casey went off ill, actually. So it was a different kind of injury. They're difficult. Nankiville's a wonderful New Zealand player and can set guys like Abrahams free. They're dangerous. So Jake said in the press conference, how many times has anyone held Munster to 1 try at Thomond Park? I don't know what the answer is, but it doesn't seem very likely. That's how it played out. There were only 3 line breaks for Munster. There was 1 line break for the Bulls. There were a couple of other kick-throughs for the Bulls that you could look at as line breaks, when the ball's bouncing beyond the defensive umbrella and you're chasing it and the only savior is the touchline. That's a line break, really. So kick-throughs were really important. 43 kicks by the Bulls, 6 or 7 retained. Munster had a better percentage of retained ball because they did the grubber really well. Jack Crowley did dummy grubber. He did dummy inside pass. He did dummy keep. He put the ball on the ground a lot. The ball doesn't bounce very much like Loftus. It sits and it gets stuck in a rut. And then people just flood the zone. The breakdown was a war. Everyone felt like the other guy was cheating. Everyone was mad at each other. They squared off a lot. There was a lot of hand wringing and handbags and handcuffs, but no one had a proper punch. And at 10-all at halftime, it felt exactly right. There was sustained pressure by the Bulls, leading to a flop try by Marcel Coetzee. And that was also enervating to the locals because Cameron Honeycomb kneed the ball instead of tapped with his foot in the lead up. So they felt aggrieved about that as well. There was a beautiful cross kick to Sebastian, who cut in. And I thought the same thing as Jake did when I talked to him in the kitchen. It's like, why'd you do that? Just run to the corner. And if you get in trouble, flip it back to your cover, to your support lines. But he said he cut way in and ran into the teeth of the defense and then tried to lob one over. It was intercepted. So that could have been 15 or 17-3, and then it would have been a different story. But going in 10-all with kind of leaking penalties at the end and making Munster work hard for that 1 try, even though they scored the try, it took 6 minutes instead of 1 minute of red zone pressure. Then that felt about right. Kubis Visa told me at the bar, he said, why did we defend in the final 2 minutes and 23 seconds without a penalty? But why did we give up so many penalties at the end of the first half? And it's a rhetorical question. And he said that was one of the things at Oranges that they really stressed, is defending, getting up on your feet. Anyone rolling around on the ground in the mud is going to get pinged. If you're attached to a rock, you get pulled in. If you're around the rock, you get pulled in. So you must get up. Tyburn is like an expert practitioner of getting you involved in a ruck you don't want to be in. So, and they ruck long and they bind long. They were not doing the window washer cleaning thing, that's been under so much attack. They were just going long, going beyond the ruck. And so you had to get out of it. And in the final defensive sequence that won the match, where Munster was gaining ground, but so slowly and so laboriously, and it took so much cleaning. Um, Bulls were getting off the ball, running away, and specifically getting behind the offside line by at least a meter. And the ref was looking at that, and every time he looked at that, it was a clean picture. When he came back to the ruck, of course, we cheated then, But it's all about reading the ref and his eyes, and getting on that high line.
Okay, one of the special things about this weekend's game was the fact that you were actually accredited as a representative of Megafoon and of the Lekker Rugby Pod. And thank you to the Bulls and to Sean from Munster for helping us to get your accreditation. What was it like being, sitting on the press benches? I normally complain about it, but I mean, still, it's quite special. What did you think?
No, it was. I thought it was actually highly enjoyable. I was sitting in the press area, and the only thing I got from that, so it's not enclosed. You're just on long tables. What I got from that is everyone has a flat screen TV that portrays the match about 10 to 12 seconds behind what's on the field. And that was nice. That was very nice to see a thing and then go, oh, wait, let me see that, and then come back. Sort of real time. You couldn't pause it or anything, but it was really helpful on, I think, lineouts especially. Because I was looking at every lineout to see, was Munster going to do a decoy? Were they going to use 2 or 3 lifters as a decoy? Were they going to make the pivot man? Were they going to make Ruan Nortje guess? Or was Ruan going to almost always just go up at the front and bother it? 2 towers. Because Munster had a hard time finishing their lineouts. And so this game, they just bailed out and kind of went to the easy throw or threw it way over. 2 or 3 times, they just skied it and had a center coming up to catch the ball or a forward. And that worked out for them until it didn't. And fixing a line out is you can kind of do it in 1 week, but it's hard to do against the Bulls where you have so many jumpers, so many contests, and you keep bringing them off. You can bring Jeff off the bench. And a guy like Cameron doesn't need a lifter to contest. He's just so good in the air, so explosive. And so I think they did struggle when it really did matter. So the Bulls had some nothing kicks that went out to touch that turned into 50-22s because Munster's lineout wasn't very solid. It was sort of a 1 and 2 a proposition in their own red zone.
Harry, after the game, what stood out for you? What was special?
It was the sound of Thomond Park completely silenced. Respectful, good fans, great fans. They always cheer the injured player. They clap you off. They know the game, but they were completely silent. And the cry, the shout, the exuberant joy of the Bulls filled the echoing stadium twice. Once organically on the field, arms raised. The guys who had enough strength to raise their arms. Marcel Coetzee had made 31 tackles, so we'll excuse him for not raising his arms. Kubas Visa had over 20. Cam had over 20. Good hard work. But then the second one was when they gathered for a picture. Claiming the field, that little portion. This is our turf now. Come and get it. Spicy, really good. It'll inspire because I saw the Munster players watching and saying, oh, yeah, let's see next time. So that's what you want in a competition. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be all friends all the time. We're friends at the end. And true enough, in the post press conference, which was kind of weird because I gathered in the little press room. And you know me, I didn't have any notes or any like special like magic questions. I didn't even know how to introduce myself, quite frankly. Jake comes in and says, "Hey Harry," we give a little man hug, and he's talking about he was asking me questions and joking about the cross kicks. And then the Munster press guy comes in, Sean, and sort of says, "Hey Jake, we have to move you because all the Munster guys want to question their players." So they take Jake and I to a kitchen, and we sit down with the Bulls press guy with a laptop, and then all the questions come in live on Zoom. But I'm sitting, I could touch him, and we're just hanging out at a table in the kitchen with people walking by. Some Munster guys are actually on their phones, and we have to shush them. And we have this press conference, and then we have the 3 or 4 minute thing where I'm just talking to him straight, and then we followed up with some more. But after all that, and Jake was, of course, really happy. His main his main irritation was just making sure get his zipper off of his jacket. He was kind of got stuck, but he was super happy and happy to talk about the beating all 4 Irish provinces in 1 year, first time ever. Beating Munster at Thomond Park, first time ever for South African team. But then we go to the suite. I'm there with Munster royalty, and I'm thinking it's going to be kind of a dirge, like a funeral parade. Now there's a band and they're playing, and then people are having Guinness, and then the Bulls are right there inside the suite. So that's when I got to talk to Kobus and Huissen and de Klerk, and just have a good time and fair play. And the Irish say this a lot. To be fair, there was no down in the dumps, and they picked themselves up really well. They are, as Ola told me, we're used to losing. We know how to lose. We know how to win, and we know how to lose. And I think that is something that's very nice to see, and something we could learn from them and do better about how to lose graciously. Because I don't think we always do that very well. And it was awesome. Kobus told me about all kinds of things. We went into some details that I'll keep to myself. But the idea of the effort that it took, the toll it took on his body, with 2 ACLs, big boy, always in the middle. So he's having to take the tackle of a guy like Tyburn, who he could not speak more highly of. Just the cleverness of a guy like him, and how much you have to watch him, and how many edges and angles he's trying to get all the time. Kubas was super nice. I could not believe that I named him my nemesis and said he was the scariest human on the field. The boy could not be nicer, and funny too. And so that was it. That was the wash-up.
Of course, it's Easter weekend, and you did your reaction for us to the game on Sunday morning, on the banks of some river in Ireland. Talk to me about, the next day after the match. What were the locals like? What was the feeling like? Or what did you pick up?
In the morning, Easter Sunday at a farmer's market, getting a wonderful pig sandwich adorned by onions and slathered with all kinds of chutney. People were talking about the 14-man thing. Sure. They were talking about the Cameron Honeycomb knee instead of the tap and go. But they were also talking about how it was a really great match. And I heard more than once people say it was like a test match. So you're not on your own. There was something very good about the blue and the red. There was something very good about the different styles clashing with just enough the same and just enough different. And for a guy like me, it was nice to see Huissen step up. He takes a lot of knocks, but he's absolutely on his day, still a really good tactician. I also thought it was incredible to see the red zone ferocity by both sides, knowing that there's so few times you can get into a red zone in a game like that. You just have to make it count.
The one thing I wanted to ask you specifically, and one of the, I don't want to say aims, but the highlights almost of this trip was your newfound friendship with Jake White. I've been a Jake White fanboy for a long time. I've been accused of being a fanboy as well, but I've got my reasons. And I wanted to ask you, having gotten to know Jake a bit better now, the tactician, the man, spending time in the kitchen with him. Actually published your video of the press conference where we were all talking to Jake on Zoom. The reason I'm not sitting in front of my usual bookcase is because we've been without power for 4 days now, so I couldn't even watch the game. So I couldn't. I was in the Zoom, but I couldn't ask any questions. So the point I'm trying to make is, Jake, as a person, as a coach, what were your impressions?
I've always rated Jake as a clever coach, and I've always thought that he's one of the best selection coaches. Which he doesn't fool himself. He doesn't get caught in exotic picks or favorites. I think he knows how to pick a team. I think sometimes he takes the bait when people come at him, and that he should probably learn, like all of us, to shake it off and let it slide off his shoulders. But that's a comment about any middle-aged guy who's been good at what he does, and some joker comes in, having looked at 2 things and goes, "Oh, Jake, what about this?" I get that. I totally get that. but he's literate. He's a traveled guy. He's got interesting thoughts. He talked to me about a book he was reading. We talked about things outside rugby. And he had fun. He was having fun at the captain's practice. I mean, literally, we talked for 15 minutes and he wasn't even watching the captain's practice. And when he did go on the field, he was kind of daring Zach Berger to kick over his hands as if it was poles, like games like that, and kind of getting him shit when he didn't. He was having a good time, but I felt like we bonded well. And one thing is, I think he wanted to wait to see if I was full of shit. So when I was talking about lineouts, for example, and then cross kicks, I think he recognized it and I knew a little bit. So then he cross-referenced, where I was from and who I played with, and that kind of stuff, and the bum sniffing shit. And then once you get over that, he was like, couldn't have been nicer, was generous, was sharing things. We were just having a good chat. Came by at the end of captain's practice again. I said, listen, low trajectory cross kicks, get it to Kanan in a hurry. Don't let the little guy gather and jump. Keep your mismatch. And so at the end of the game, literally he comes in and he's pointing at me like, hey, cross kicks, did you like that? So he got a sense of fun. He's not just, he's been World Cup final winner, so he's not overawed by this occasion. But I found him to be very generous. At the end, I did my 3 minutes. He was already done, and he couldn't have been nicer. And the kind of guy, whether it's charm or real, he said, Harry, my friend, that kind of stuff. The little things, little clues that he's got a heart for it, and also knows that we're trying to understand the rugby. The Bulls were trying to get there. And I do the same thing with the Stormers. There's no team on earth that I love more than Western Province, than Stormers. Even my love of the box is derivative in a weird way, Like I just love it. But I'm gonna give them shit when they do bad. The goof troop playing like there's no tomorrow, no exits, no plan. Just we'll score 50, you score 49. I would like to see more of this 13, 16, 13 kind of game from the Stormers. I felt like the Bulls came back to their roots, tapped into the DNA, just like with this Irish countryside. The Bulls found a history. They found their roots. There's a reason why we call the Bulls. We're gonna stampede you. We're gonna keep coming. We have no feelings. We have no weakness. We're just preposterously hard men, and I think that was really good, coupled with extreme chase on the kicks. Also, the track back. Let's give Ruan credits. There are probably 3 or 4 times where a chip kick by Jack Crowley, awkwardly positioned, was going to go and land somewhere bad. Ruan was running full speed and going back to catch it over his shoulder, and then get pummeled in the back and pushed and slid 10 meters back, but keep the ball, feed it back, exit. Those kind of games, they don't really go much on the stat sheet. Loose ball collected or kicks collected, and then getting like -10 on your carry. But they can win a match for you.
Just quickly while we're talking about people, Marcel Coetzee, once again played out of his skin, 31 tackles you mentioned earlier. And why is he not in the running for the Springboks, do you think?
Because he carries backward sometimes. He'll go into contact backward. Rassi hates that. If he sees something's one time, he doesn't like it forever. He could fix it. And I think on this game, he went in forward. He always met shoulder to shoulder, won the shoulder battle. He was the start of every fight, too. I think by giving Ruan the captain's badge, it kind of helps Marcel in a way because he can be his horrible self. His tackles were brutal. I suppose in this year, Marcel will be in the box setup. How could you not keep Marcel in with potential injuries? With Kubas's brother having had his neck surgery, with both Cameron and Ruiz having parts of the game they still have to work on at a test level, and maybe for Cameron it's the body. The test there's some things he might have to develop for the test game, and for Ruiz it's more in the mind. Marcel's got sort of both. He's got the test body and the test mind. But I think it's definitely something when you get injured that much in certain parts of your body that you would be insensate not to think about it. So I think Marcel is feeling some of that. It's like late career Schalkberger. You saw him going backwards into contact and acting like it was to offload, but really it was because he didn't want to get hit in the face. And so I think there's that. And the other thing I've heard about is the ability to link. So I think if Marcel could just piece together one package where he would get the ball, break a tackle, and then find someone, the way Cameron does. Honeycomb is always looking. That's one thing, watching him both in practice and how handsy he is, how quick he is to see something and to release the ball. Even when you're doing these fake ruck drills, he's the only guy looking to offload. And so I think Marcel might need to think about Tony Brown more than anyone else. Like, what does Tony like? Not so much what does Rassie like.
Just quickly on this weekend coming, the big game, Friday night against Glasgow, short turnaround for the Bulls. And for both teams, actually, because Glasgow also played against Zebre later than the Bulls. But Glasgow struggled against Zebre. They were actually behind at one stage. Looking forward to this game. Do you think this extremely physical game against Munster, you said the Bulls could barely lift their arms then, to celebrate the victory? How's the Bulls looking for this crucial match? I mean, Jake's been playing it up since the final last year, and he also mentioned again in the press conference that 25th of April was marked in everybody's calendars at the beginning of the season. So the game there's a big, big game. What's your thoughts on that coming for the Bulls going into that game?
Huge. Kuba said the same thing that, and this is where he did look kind of sinister. He looked right in the eyes and is like, we want this game. Gonna fucking move him. So I'm like, something was talked about a long time ago. I don't know. Jake got a bit mad at me actually back in the day because I was talking about not knowing why the Bulls lost to Glasgow fully, and that's sort of haunting the Bulls. And now I kind of see why there was emotion around that. Because, in one way I'm right and one way I'm wrong. So I'm right in the sense that it was a big thing. The wrong thing is, I think maybe I was thinking that they haven't fully absorbed what that meant. That loss was problematic for the Bulls. It was set up, home game, finals. You don't always know when you're going to get back. You don't know how much better Leinster will get, for example. So it's a squandered thing. But fair play, I was wrong. They had circled it. And it was interesting because he didn't even have to be prompted about it. Jake was right there with that. Boom, and all the players know that this is something they're being judged on, that they're building this to a crescendo. This win in Munster was like a bonus. They didn't really expect it. They were hoping to stay within 7, get a losing bonus point, draw, sneak a win. They did the best, sneak a win. So it is set up. Short turnaround. However, and this is not scientific, and don't quote me on it, it didn't look like they had serious injury from the game. It looked more like a load issue. And there's some rotations they can pull that will be okay. The only people I saw walking around, hobbling, at the bar, magically, his person was fine, by the way. One Guinness and nothing wrong with his leg. But I did think Cameron took a few knocks to the shoulder. I think it was his left. So we'll have to look at that. Sometimes that could just be ice.
Okay, Harry, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I was extremely jealous of you. I don't know the right word. Envious, maybe a better word. Being on the inside of both those teams. And I like the fact that you mentioned that one of the reasons why there's such a big rivalry is because we're essentially the same. When you describe Munster, you could have just as easily described the Bulls. And when you talked about the Bulls, it could have just easily has been Munster. And I think that sort of colors it, dresses it up nicely for me.
Yeah, there's a generational respect in that part of Ireland. I'm not excluding any other part of Ireland, but I'm just speaking primarily right now about that particular area, the hotbed, the heartland of Munster rugby. There's a generational respect. There's fields where they play, where they almost feel like they're blessed to be playing there, because there's hallowed memories of people gone by. So it's a very kind of Bulls vibe in the sense of respect, I guess is the word I'm looking for here. So your envia has envy. This is a good this is a good note. But no, I was really proud to carry your name and the channel's name. It was kind of fun to announce myself from Lekker Rugby Pod. Talking to Jake gave him a little bit of a smile, and yeah, I think we are trying to do some Lekker things here. And I think more importantly, the guys at the Bulls, and there's other teams as well like this, but the Bulls in particular, we're talking about this week. They recognize it, that it's not. I don't know, the professional, lifelong journalist who's just looking to make a headline and impress his editor. We're trying to dig into why things happen. There's one thing that I was thinking about that would have to work better at Glasgow is we're back to this idea of speeding up in the red zone. And when you have a moment that you've got to have each ruck be quicker than the one before, instead of decelerating like a golf swing that goes into the bushes, you've got to go accelerate. And so I did like the try movement with Marcel because of that. It felt like around the corner was getting quicker. There were other moments in the rest of the game where it didn't do that. So I don't think Glasgow is going to be as easy to beat, and they're not going to be held to one try.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm looking forward to this preview we're going to be doing on Thursday. Big game against Glasgow, like you mentioned. Franco Smith on the back foot a little bit after that loss against Leinster, Nold, and also struggling against Zebra. Jake on the front foot. He's got a point to prove. So lots at stake there. A big game. Probably another test match almost. So looking forward to that. Thanks, and travel safely.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megafoon Rugby.